Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to Evening Talk right here on Salam Media with your host. My name is Luqman Skink. And of course, you are able to tune in via our Twitter, Facebook, and online streaming accounts. We welcome you all to Evening Talk. Of course, this past weekend was a very, very significant weekend in the political sphere. The African National Congress held its sixth policy conference at the Nasrec Center in the south of Johannesburg, next to Soweto. 2,000 delegates over 3 days to discuss policy they would like to see in the next 5 years. The conference is important in that whatever policy positions are adopted, those could impact the lives of every person living in South Africa, whether we're ANC or ANC supporters or not. Because as the governing party, those policies would eventually form part of government's policy. Historically, not every policy adopted has made it into the statute books. A great example of that is the expropriation without compensation policy. As we all know, that the ANC fell short of a two-thirds majority and therefore were not able to actually implement that policy. But it is an important policy conference. And other policies in the conference that I discussed govern internal codes of conduct, such as how to respond to corruption, step aside rule also coming in again for quite a lot of discussion. And of course, I think the step aside rule was the most trending topic in this sixth conference, particularly because ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says that he does not think the South African voters would forgive the ANC if they did away with the ANC, with the step aside resolution. However, he also mentioned that the party is at its weakest right now and urged delegates to come up with policy that would inspire voters to keep it in power. So, hanging on to power is the ANC, Africa's oldest liberation movement and political movement. Joining me right now to unpack some of these discussions is political analyst Thabang Mashigo. Thabang, good evening to you and welcome to Salam Media.
Amiable evening to you and your listeners, and assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you, Thabang. A great pleasure to speak to you. And first of all, we'd like to say a happy Women's Month to you as well as everybody else.
Absolutely, thank you. I think in the context where there's a lot of GBV and women have been discouraged, devalued in so many ways, I think it's really great for them to be acknowledged in a month such as this. Not only this month, but all the time. Just the essence of
Absolutely.
humanity. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. It was by no design of mine, but I think an absolute coincidence that my first interview in the month of August was, I'm hosting a female in yourself. So I was telling my manager that I'm keeping with the Women's Month theme of the channel. But thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us. We appreciate that.
sure.
Taban, so the step aside rule, as I said in my introduction, seems to be the most intense discussions that were at the policy conference. What do you make of the fact that they decided to stay with the step aside resolution?
I think the first thing is what we can observe is that clearly the ANC knows that there's a moral regeneration that is required in this time where
Mhm.
it's conflicted within itself, and socially we are also conflicted, but most importantly there's social decadence that is taking place. So for the step aside rule to be retained is for me a strategy for them to say, look, we still prioritizing the notion of ethical leadership. We're still trying to resolve issues around corruption and so forth. So once again, moral regeneration. How do we evolve from where we are, and how do we make sure that we uproot anything that challenges our ethics or our leadership strategy within the ANC. So for me, retaining the step aside rule, I think it's quite interesting to see. For me, it's more of a public strategy to see. Sort of giving the ANC a second chance to say, look, we're still prioritizing the notion of leadership, morality, and ethics. But let's see how far it will go. And I think it's also used as a tool for the voters to say you still have the power to decide who stays in power
Mm.
within the ANC. So it's also sort of giving them the baton and reaffirming that voter confidence is critical, and you still have the right, you still have the self-determination and autonomy to decide who you want to see leading the ANC. So I'm not
Mm.
really moved by it, to be quite honest, Mr. Skink.
You're not really moved by it, and I think a lot of voters are actually responding to the fact that the ANC is saying, "Look, you know what? This is the one thing that our people or our voters are really, really concerned about, and
Mm.
therefore they want to make sure that the step aside resolution stays so that they could continue with this reformist renewal agenda." Do you think, Thabang, that the ordinary South African voter is moved? I mean, or at least is going to be convinced that, okay, because the ANC is going to retain the step aside resolution, then we can vote for them, then we can return them to power? Is it really the only thing that is stopping people from voting for the ANC?
Absolutely not. And I think even if we were to prioritize it as the only principle or tenant that could influence voters, would definitely would be undermining the capacities that voters have. And for me, it's a myriad of, issues that we need to look at. First things first, what is the purpose of a policy conference? It's to discuss national resolutions that the leading party wants to implement. Can we go back to what has been effectively implemented, and how have these policies helped? I know that there were also discussions around, you know, um, the social grants being kept at 350. Can the ordinary South African even survive on that amount? If you're looking at a family of five staying in a one room or staying in a shack, is it realistic? Have we undermined social welfare and social justice to that degree? So absolutely not. It's not the only thing. Though people look, there's a fraction of the ANC within and also externally who still feels that, if you still have the power to decide who leads the ANC, will still continue to vote. But for me, most importantly, is I think as humanity, we need to go back to the places that wounded us. We need to go back to the places that hurt us. And I think when the ordinary voter goes back to what happened in apartheid or what happened in colonialism, who was ruling and how they were ruling, there's a fear that comes up to say, if we are under white supremacy again, how is that going to operate? Will we still have the freedom? Never mind freedom or free
Mhm.
will be misused in this day and age, but will we still have the capacity to decide how to lead this country? And right now, just to answer your question, Mr. Skink, no, it's not the only thing that can make voters decide if ANC will rule in 2024. We would be undermining voters if we think that the step aside policy is the only nutrient or the only tenant that will increase or decrease voter confidence. There's more to it. There's issues of taxation. There's issues of high standards of living. There's issues
Mhm.
of petrol prices. There's issues of, labor laws that are not being effectively applied. So there's a myriad of issues that could decide whether the ANC still retains its power in the upcoming elections.
Hmm. So it's almost like that person that knows that the breakup is coming, but doing their utmost best to stay in the relationship. And but is it a case of too little, too late? Do you think? I mean, 2024 is literally around the corner, Tabang.
It's not far away. I mean, the ANC Policy Conference, just to look at it, platuded to the fight against corruption, also signaling state paralysis and all these other things. And I mean, in one of my interviews on the SABC, I said a simple analogy is that the ANC currently is on life support, and it's up to the voters, it's up to the citizens whether they want to switch off this machine or not. And indeed, is it is like a breakup when someone, no matter how much you love a person, but when it's over and when you're done, you're completely done. There is no part of you that even wants to respond to the relationship, no matter how much a person can request for forgiveness. So right now they really are about to be the ex partner of society. And look, 2024 is around the corner. There's little time for it to redeem itself. But for me, every crisis presents an opportunity, and it's how is that
Mm.
opportunity going to be utilized, and how are they going to leverage on some of the issues. Look, 2024 being what, about 2 years from now, there's a
Right.
lot that even if they do one policy change, or they look at implementing something effectively that could
Mm.
contribute to creating a welfare state, and that could communicate the democratic, nuances that we have in place, I still think they have that opportunity to soar in the storm. But it's who is pushing that narrative, who is pushing that change, because the ANC in itself is still
Mm.
divided. There are
Right.
fractions within it that are still divided.
Mm.
Who are they
Mm.
listening to? Right now, they're listening to corporate, they're listening to business. But what about the needs of the people who really put
Right.
them there? It's like putting someone in power and saying, oh, by the way, now that you put me in power, deuces, I'm done with you. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at the moment with the
Yeah.
ANC. It's all like support.
Mm. Anyway, I'd just like to acknowledge that Thengiwe and Gugu are watching on the streaming service, and I see them as well. And I'd like to acknowledge them.
Hi,
Thank you very
yeah.
much. And of course, yeah, Tabang, you spoke
She's my
about
sister.
the. Oh, fantastic! You spoke, Tabang, about the welfare state, and a lot of analysts, and I'm sure you've also just alluded to it, are saying that if the ANC can do something for the people who have been suffering a myriad of challenges, okay, it's ESCOM, to the cost of living, to the high unemployment rate, particularly amongst young people, then maybe they might give the electorate, that is, might give the party another chance. But they failed, it seemed, to capitalize on this policy conference to make something, a bold decision to say, hey, listen, this is the policy that we're going to vigorously pursue, the basic income grant, for example, because really, quite, honestly speaking, life is getting not easier, but more difficult.
Mm. Absolutely. Some of the issues that you've mentioned, Mr. Skink, are as a result and are a direct reflection of the ANC's governance failings.
Mm.
Once again, going back to your analysis about an ex, if an ex comes back and then says, look, these are the areas where I've failed, but this is actually my disposition, and this is what I propose to change. You listen to that proposition, but you also wait for that proposition to be effectively applied. So
Right.
for me is, how long are we going to have policies, and like you're saying, your basic income? Can a person live on basic income? For me, if the president looked at, for example, when he campaigned in his presidential address and so forth, the most important thing, as inferred from Zuma, Zuma looked at Black industrialist program and radical economic transformation. How do we then create local and regional economies that thrive effectively? And Zuma's administration, though it's been dimmed down by the media, he did that through creating industrial development zones, special economic zones, and so forth. But
Mm.
unfortunately, we still had multinational corporations. We still had, the Chinese. We still had guys from India. We still had guys from Spain coming in and claiming those spaces as their own. Once again, denying the very same people that are disadvantaged, Black businesses and Black people, access. So it's a repetition of colonialism, neo-colonialism, where now people cannot functionally operate in their businesses, but they are expected to acquire a skill and be employed. So once again, it kills the
Mm.
notion of regional. Coming back into President Cyril Ramaphosa then says, let's have the Yes Initiative, where we are now increasing elements of employment. And ask myself, what has that strategy or strategic plan done?
Mhm.
Because you're saying people must be employed, but there's different forms of employment. There's casual employment, there's informal employment, where people don't have pay as you earn, people don't have medical aid, people can't effectively contribute, in whatever salaries that they have. People don't have access to, investment plans, savings plans, for example. We have provident funds, but are they fully effective? Are they fully representing the needs of the people? So for me today is, it's not, we can't keep giving society a fish. Do you really think, Mr.
Mm,
Skink, that
mm,
somebody wants to be sitting at home? We call them loction managers, a guy who wakes up and he smokes his all or his hookah pipe, and he drinks and he sits waiting, watching the bus, different taxis collecting different people, watching the buses collecting people and dropping them back. No, we are all
mm,
intrinsically
mm,
born with a purpose to contribute to the ecosystem of society. We all have intrinsic value, but it is government that helps accentuate that intrinsic value within us. So for me, just giving people grants is not enough.
mm,
Today we
mm,
complain that we have foreign nationals in the country that South Africans will say are taking our jobs. It's absolute hogwash. It's absolute nonsense. What is happening now is that how other African economies and African governments have thrived is now a mirror effect to South Africa. Let me give you a case study.
okay.
Zimbabwe, in the times of Rhodesia and so forth, prioritized the upskilling of their citizens. For
Mm,
the fact that they don't have opportunities within the economy for those citizens to be employed is another discussion altogether. But the first premise of the government was to make sure that Zimbabweans are upskilled. And guess what?
right.
As South Africa, we need those skills. And this is
Mm,
why they are coming into the country and they are offering exactly what we need. So if the ANC applied the same strategy of upskilling technical skills, even in the apartheid regime, the ESCOMs that you have today, immediately when a Bura boy graduated or matriculated,
right.
some of them would go to be soldiers, to be trained in the military. But others, the government made sure that they created an apprenticeship program that
Mm,
was mandatory for their citizens or their people to attend after they matriculated. What was that apprenticeship program? It was upskilling to make sure that when they
mm,
are deployed to manage state companies like the likes of ESCOM, they're able to supply those technical skills for the sustainability of ESCOM today. So what we failed to do as the ANC and as African government is to capacitate individuals, not only to serve themselves and to provide for their own families, but to capacitate the economy. We can't go to Germany when we have engineers in the country to build the Gautrain. We can't be saying, let's get German technicals to come through and build the Gautrain in our land when we have engineers. So I blame the government for whatever that is coming to them, because the most important thing, we are supposed to be creating a parastatal company where we take and we bring in different kind of skills. So let's say it's government owned, you are an engineer, you're an architect, you are a teacher, you are so forth. Every time there is a triple P project, public partnership, private project, that the government issues and the government is in control of through tender processes, they source from this company. In that way,
right.
everybody is employed, everybody is upskilled, everybody is eating. But because we've got people that lack altruism and that are leading based on self-interest, we're going to be having this discussion again next year.
Thabang, I just want to ask you one last question with regards, obviously the elephant or the buffalo in the room, the Pala Pala farm gate scandal. Apparently, it wasn't even discussed by any of the delegates, or it didn't get the prominence that people were hoping it would. So, does this mean that Ramaphosa's second term is safe in December? How do you read into that? Do you think? Mm,
It was not discussed because it was a strategic move for it to be discussed, in that everything in the ANC is swept under the carpet. So for me, it was quite a
oh,
predictable move that it was discussed. There's a lot of corruption that's been swept under the carpet. So,
mm,
how about we introduce and accentuate load shedding so that we don't talk about Ipalapala? And for the fact the president does not bring himself forward as an ethical leader that he claims to be,
mm,
as a political leader that is not just leading the ANC but leading the country, for me is a problem, because every leader in whatever promise that they make to lead the country vows to transparency and accountability. Yes, look, Pala Pala being a personal, it's his personal, accumulation, it's his personal assets. And I also think Sometimes we don't have boundaries, but unfortunately, when you're a public figure, you are a public figure, and the public has access to your private matters. But it was a breach of a lot of laws, especially FICA. How do you have so much cash stashed
Yes.
in your house? And these are the laws that your government is creating and advocating, that you can't have a minimum of 50,000 cash that you're traveling with. So what is it saying? Where is our credibility as leaders? And people are tired, Mr. Skink. People are tired, taxpayers, and this is why a lot of companies are now looking for NGOs who are producing credible results, who are doing credible changes in our community, because no company wants to pay 18 million in tax. They'd rather go to an NGO, say, I want your tax exemption certificate, and let's build houses, let's build projects.
Right.
And now we're seeing a lot of those initiatives. Communities are taking the power back to themselves. There are guys who are now, doing their own cooperative banks. There are guys that are building houses that I know of. One of them is Mnoto Investments. They have their own soup kitchens. They have their own feeding
Right.
schemes. So once again, if society is then a reflection of government, and this is what I always say, that NPOs, NGOs, and civil society is now becoming the 21st century government. And if the ANC, alongside other political parties, does not wake up and smell the coffee, we are going to be in so much trouble. And by the way, even if you bring an EFF or a DA or all these other parties that are in power, the same shenanigans are going to happen. But we are looking for individuals, and we're looking for people that have a heart, that people that are bleeding on behalf of this nation, people that are saying you can't have a PhD and be unemployed and be a street kid, people that are saying an elderly woman, ugogo omdala, can't be sitting in a house that doesn't have a roof, people that are saying we can't have young people that occupy 65% of the population, and they're sitting being consumed. Their dreams are being consumed by drugs. So right now we need ANC to restore the value of the people if they want to continue to lead, and to really sort out the internal politics and account where they need to account. We are tired of them going to court, and
Absolutely.
there's going to be Zondo commissions and state reports and so forth. But for
Yes.
how long, Skink? How long are we going to have that? When are we going to have a leader that is going to say, listen, I'm about to be an ex-boyfriend. I really messed up. But this is how I propose in my remaining years. This is how I propose
Absolutely.
in my remaining years or the duration of leadership to inculcate this change.
Right. We have a comment here from Google saying, could you ask Thabang to please talk about the psychology of the people who continuously put the ANC in power, even though it does not serve them? It seems like an abusive relationship. And then she brings up the example of Tembisa, like we've seen in recent days. Quick comment, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Google, for your comment.
Absolutely, I'll also be very quick. And
Mm,
here's the thing that you are raising, which is for me very critical: the psychology of the voter and voter confidence.
mm.
I can't be complaining about the ANC, but I still sleep with their T-shirt at night and still queue in the voting stations. Once again, voters are not voting based on ideology or desire; they are voting based on fear. And how the ANC has positioned this voter confidence is, remember, we saved you from apartheid. We walked with you guys from apartheid. So you can't afford to bring white people in power. And this is the narrative for me that is losing its intrinsic value as time goes on, because is it about black or white? Or is it about policies that are disadvantaging humanity? Yes, we've got BEE, we've got affirmative action, but guess what? A lot of black people are being used as fronts for some of these companies to thrive. A lot of black people are allowing the deprivation of black people. A typical example is right in front of us with the ANC being black leaders, knowing what they've encountered. Some of them have been to exile, some of them have encountered solitary confinement. But you telling me that you went to solitary confinement for this that we see today? Absolutely not. And so we've got a lot of sellouts in the ANC. We've got also a lot of sellouts as voters. And unfortunately, the very same people that are striking and are burning buildings and are saying municipality is not responding are the very same people that are pulling the plugs within the municipality. And this is
Hmm.
the problem we have. So the voter must take themselves seriously, and the voter must stop being a hypocrite. The voter must not only speak up, but really initiate their voice through action. And action is stepping aside to say, okay, I'm no longer going to be doing this, or these are my conditions. And this is why civil society has got to be involved in parliamentary decisions and policies that come through. And unfortunately, access has been quite an issue in that regard.
Absolutely. I wish I could speak with you much longer, Thabang. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our discussion. I think you've really elucidated the very key important issues, and I look forward to
Yeah.
hearing more from you. I absolutely do. I hope you have a fantastic, peaceful, and blessed Women's Month further. It's just the beginning. We've got a whole month ahead of us. Although we did see some horrific, incidents at at the end of July, we certainly hope
Yeah.
that we're going to have a peaceful Women's Month for you, for your family, extended people, and everybody else. Thank you so much, Thabang, and great chatting to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Skink, and all the best. Thank you to the radio station as well for doing this. We really need such platforms and such conversations. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thabang Mashigo, there, political analyst, joining us, talking to us about the ANC Policy Conference that just ended at the Nasrec Center, and talking to us about the issues that we find ourselves in South Africa. Of course, it is the beginning of Women's Month. The issue of gender-based violence is a key issue that the ANC has to lead society in that regard. We're going to take a short break. Inshallah, we'll be back with Palestine Radio. Stay tuned.